The opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
And the podcast is now on the air. This is Anime Roundtable version 2, digest number 6 on this Friday evening, September 11th, 2020, lest we forget. Now, I remember last year we did an episode taped on September 11th as well. And Kevin and James were doing that episode with me. And we relayed a couple memories of that day. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you can re-listen to our thoughts back then. I do, however, have one story today, and it doesn't really involve me, but it involves a friend in New York. Close enough that we can consider this friend family. He put up on his social media today, or was it yesterday, relayed a story about driving to work on September 11th, 2001. As he put it, he was talking to the girl he loved while she was on her way to work, while heading for the job he didn't. And in the distance, he saw a plume of smoke coming away from the World Trade Center. And his girlfriend at the time was closer to the vicinity and asked her what was more going on. And then as they were talking, a plane flew in to another building. It was the second plane. He quickly stuttered, asked if she felt that, and she said, yeah, she could feel the impact and the heat, but she was otherwise fine, but really scared. All the while, he pulled over on the freeway. He was listening to Howard Stern, and in his story, he relayed, Howard Stern started to go crazy on the air. His girlfriend at the time had never been late for work. Where did she work, you ask? 7 World Trade Center. It's not the 2 main towers. If you know the story, you know that the Twin Towers weren't the only 2 buildings destroyed that day. The collapse of the North Tower, the second tower that came down that day, heavily impacted a building next door, 7 World Trade Center. And the impact eventually made it unstructurally sound, and the building ultimately collapsed in the late afternoon around 5 p.m., if memory serves me right. There were no deaths involving the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, which is where my friend's girlfriend at the time was supposed to go. They're married now. But another story from that day. Okay, there isn't too much to add tonight. Well, too much for me to add. Kevin, Ing, Mohammed Shamarki, they're here tonight. I know Kevin would had told a story last year. Mo, do you have a story to add?
Not particularly.
No?
I mean, I was in the 8th grade when it happened. Nothing really happened, I guess.
Okay. No, there isn't, as I said, it isn't too much to add. I know last year when we talked about it, we talked a lot about, how as time goes, if you didn't have an emotional attachment to the events. And when I say that, it's more like you lost somebody or you were directly impacted in some form. But your memories of it just fade and blunt quite a bit. You respect what happened. But if nothing directly happened to you, it doesn't quite hit as hard, admittedly. And I guess that's... And I'm talking as somebody who has relatives in New York, and I'm pretty sure those relatives feel a lot different. But it just quietly goes for someone like myself. Okay, let's lighten it up a little bit. First of all, this is a digest number 6, as I said off the top. We're not really going to talk headlines this week, at least anime-related wise. We're going to save that for our next regular episode next week when James joins us. James Austin, as you can probably guess now, because I didn't mention his name and we haven't done the attendance, he is not here tonight. He is all about the Toronto Raptors. As we are taping this, we are just over 20 minutes away from tip-off for Game 7 between the Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics in the finale of their second-round series, winner-take-all. And the winner moves on to the Eastern Conference Finals to face the Miami Heat, who pretty handily destroyed the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games to secure their spot. Nobody expected Miami to be there. Everyone expected it was all about Milwaukee, but this is the scenario we're looking at. So the winner of this match tonight between the Raptors and the Celtics get the Heat. And James wants to put all his emotional energy into that tonight. So we're not expecting him this evening. However, Kevin wanted to do this episode, and I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but I think what he suggested was an interesting, actually a good idea. As regular listeners have probably, or should know by now, doesn't mean they do, when we first talked with Kevin, when he first made his debut a couple years ago, we mentioned that Kevin is quite experienced with things like the Nomonoichi at Anime North, the secondhand garage sale flea market that happens on the Friday evenings. And in turn, he's done quite well at those, and he's become quite experienced at selling secondhand anime and manga memorabilia through things like the Nomonoichi and other little bazaars and garage sales that happen and online. And Kevin reminded me that I should be doing that. I have not hidden the fact that I have a collection that is clutterific at best, and there are a lot of parts in it that I would like to sell, but I've never gotten around to doing so. But frankly, I can't say I really know where to start. Personally, I've done the Nomonoichi myself. That was in 2017, and then I failed 2 years in a row, 2018, 2019, to get in. And then everybody failed to get to the Nomonoichi this year. Actually, everybody failed to get to Anime North, period. Matter of fact, the world failed this year.
Oh, God.
Wait, I should get off my soapbox.
Wait, what happened, Mike? What did we fail at? What's on?
Actually, 2020 is not over. We'll see how much it did fail.
We're failing at containing COVID-19. Oh, my God.
So Kevin and I want to come on tonight and talk a little bit about that experience of selling secondhand stuff. And I want to impart his wisdom, and I make it sound like he's the older one, but I am asking him for advice on how to start selling items. And Kevin has seen bits and pieces of my collection. I think he's seen the list, and he knows it's quite extensive, and he knows there's a lot of potential in it.
Yes, there is.
Oh, and Mohammed's here for the ride, just to listen in as well. But we're
absolutely. I mean, I have my own box of stuff that I would like to get rid of one day, but like Mike, I don't think I could ever take that leap.
Well, I don't. As I said, I don't know where to start.
I can help you, Mohammed.
I mean,
think
we can't all be the aftermarket wizard like you, Kevin.
No,
he
okay. Sometimes all that is needed is just a push.
in this case it'll be off a cliff.
But then you won't have it anymore.
Well, let me quickly tell you one experience I had that failed miserably, at least trying to sell stuff online. Now, let me reel back for a moment here. I did say I did do the Nomo no Ichi back in 2017, and that went very well. I was happy with how it went. Maybe I sold one or two items under what I should have, but overall, I was happy with how that went. But that was...
I remember you doing fairly well.
I was happy with it overall. As I said, there's maybe one or two items looking back, maybe I would have tried to sell just for a little bit more, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. That gets lost in the mix. I'm sure you understand that feeling too, Kevin.
Yes.
But that's it. I've only tried to do eBay once to sell something, and that was it's not anime related, but it was a Kickstarter version of the Pebble smartwatches that were popular, that made some waves almost 10 years ago. I think it was 2012.
Which version was it, Mike? The first, second, or third?
It was the Kickstarter. It was the very first Kickstarter.
Wow.
I have one sealed up in the box. Tried to sell it. No takers at all. The listing ended. And I know privately, Kevin, yesterday when we talked about it, you said it's outdated technology. In one sense, it's not really worth the trouble for a lot of buyers, but I'm wondering if we can play on nostalgia and conversation pieces, because we are talking about a sealed version of arguably the watch that mainstreamed or popularized enough the smartwatch concept, as in smartwatches that connect to your smartphones, and ultimately led to the bridges for things like the Fitbits, the Apple Watches, the Android Gears and Samsung Gear watches, etc. So if nothing else, I'd like to think I would have had a conversation piece. But who knows?
It could still sell.
I'm not, in one sense, I'm not overly picky about how much it would end up selling for. I don't know. I just didn't know what I did wrong, and I know you don't know the details, Kevin, but
things just take time to sell.
Mm-hmm.
I'd hold on to it.
You
first generation Kickstarter Pebble, in like 20 years, that's gonna be worth like $100.
See,
yeah.
So a few days ago, or like maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't remember exactly, I had a Mario fragrance tag, like those things that you hang in your car.
Oh, yes.
I had 3 of them, and I finally sold my last one 2 weeks ago, and that last one was there for probably a year and a half. So sometimes things take time.
Mm-hmm. So, where do you want to start with your tips on this? I'm going to look through your messages yesterday. I think. Let me look at your messages yesterday, and maybe we can start at least where to talk here.
So, when it comes to my collection, so I have a lot of manga, and I also do still purchase anime and video games, and I don't play or consume nearly as much as I used to.
Same here.
So once a year, or like twice a year, give or take, I'll go through my collection, and then I tell myself, okay, do I still have any emotional attachment to this thing?
Oh, you're going all Marie Kondo on me, aren't you?
Well, it's true. Because like, if it's sitting there doing nothing, and you look back on, let's say I look back on, I don't know, Deers. I can't believe I picked that example, but let's say you have your DVD box set of Deers on your bookshelf, and you're like, it was fun 15 years ago when I was into shitty romantic comedies, but I don't feel the same way anymore. Get rid of it.
Yeah,
Why is
I
it
get that.
there?
I get that. I mean, I could say that about, well, let me go through the collection again, I guess. And here's the other thing, just going back to the whole my own personal story, because I told you this last night, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did go through the entire collection before the Noma Noichi 3 years ago. Cataloged it,
Yes.
cataloged it in a database program, right to a T, its exact location, like the box it was the box labeled box it was in, the labeled box it was in. But things kind of got messed up afterwards, and I never got a chance to update all that. So I'm probably going to have to redo a lot of that.
I recommend using Google Drive and entering those into either a Word document or an Excel document, like the Google version of those. Because when you say, let's say you want to go to Reddit and you want to sell stuff through whatever subreddit that allows you to, you can then just link your list through your post, and then people can then go through your list and see what you have. If you really have that much stuff. Because some people do it that way. Some people will copy and paste their list onto the physical Reddit post itself. Other people will just link to their spreadsheet or their Word document that way. And and also you have to, make sure you allow people to look at that document too, which you'll have to toggle in the options.
See, this is me not really knowing any better. You just go, it sounds like a whole batch thing.
In a sense.
Like you batch it all together in a single list that can be constantly updated.
It depends on how you operate. You as in, could be you, could be Mohammed, could be anybody. It depends on how you as a person wants to do it. So I try to take all my photos at once. If
I get it.
if I procured, let's say, 10 new items to sell, or I decided to prune 10 things out of my collection, because I'll admit, sometimes I do go on like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, and I'll buy things that I know are worth a lot that people don't realize. I'll admit that because I have to pay my bills. So I'll take all the photos in one sitting, or I try my best to. Depends on how I feel that day. Then I will post all of them at once on whatever channel that I feel is most appropriate for.
Okay. So let me give a quick example of something. And then let's see what would you suggest I'd go about trying to get rid of these, okay? I'm going to list, and these are actually here in the collection.
Okay.
Some PS1 games, maybe rare, maybe not, I don't know. Maybe a collector could be looking for them.
Okay.
And then you tell me what and let's see what would you would suggest how I go about them, okay? I'll list one game, its related sequel, and then another game altogether, which I know not many would know about, or not totally sure anybody would want, but I don't think too many know about it. There were 2 Time Crisis games that came out. So I have the first Time Crisis. It's a used copy with the gun con in the box.
Interesting.
There was a sequel, a PlayStation 1 sequel to it, the name of which I forgot. I think it was called Crisis Core, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that. And seemingly, if I was going to try and sell Time Crisis, I'd want to sell that as well. And for reference, I do have Time Crisis 2 and 3 as well. That's on PlayStation 2. The other game is Rival Schools.
Oh.
Which I know, I looked on eBay. I know that if you're lucky, you can get quite a bit out of it. I liked the game at the time. It was a nice conversation piece at the time. I know it had a bit of a cult following.
One sold today for $230 US.
Mm-hmm.
That's secondhand.
Mm-hmm.
2 days ago, a sealed copy went for $400.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
I was a fan of that game at the time.
I only know that game because of Kyosuke. I think it's Kyosuke is his name, the dude with the glasses and the white coat, the orange
Yes.
hair. Yeah,
One of the main characters.
because
Yes.
he's in Capcom vs SNK 2, which is one of my favorite fighting games.
So, suggestion. Just on the would we try and put them in a list on a Reddit, or is that worth an eBay?
Both. Preferably a Reddit sale, because you don't need to pay eBay 10%. Because eBay charges you 10% of the final price, plus HST. 10% is the fee. So if you sell rival schools for 400 Canadian, you'll be docked $40 plus tax. Canadian tax, for those who may not be in Canada, is 13% in Ontario. So it would
It's
be
a harmonized sales tax, we call it here.
so
Yes.
$44 to $45 in total. That includes your shipping too. So let's say if you offer 400 and then you didn't charge shipping, then it's fine. If you say let's say if you were charging, I don't know, $20 for shipping because you wanted to pay for the insurance, which you would want to for a game of that price range, then you'd be docked another $2 for the shipping and then tax on the $2, so $226.
Okay, so 226. Okay, so
$2.26 for shipping.
$2.26 for shipping.
Yeah.
So they'll tax. So they tax the fee.
Yeah, because
The HST is on the fee.
They did not in the past, but because eBay has operations in Canada now, they couldn't dodge that any longer.
So just to recap, right, to this point, because as I said, I'm learning on with you guys, both of you listeners out there. The HST would be strictly on the fee. Am I correct on that? It wouldn't be on the leftover whatever the sale price is.
No. If you're not a business, you don't need to charge tax to your buyers. If you're an incorporated business, then you should. If you're selling to the United States, a lot of states have recently started charging tax on online purchases. Now, eBay deals with all of that on their end. So while they'll pay the tax for whatever they're buying, you as the seller don't have to worry about any of that. eBay just handles all of that.
So in some sense, it's worth the services. Not always, but in some senses.
It depends. Depends on who you talk to. eBay is very buyer friendly. It's not nearly as friendly for sellers unless you do a lot of high volume. Unless you're a high volume seller.
Well, in this case, that's where it could get interesting for someone like me. As I said, you've seen the collection. You know what's in it, Kevin. There's a lot of potential in it.
Yes.
So there's a lot of anything can happen potential in it.
Like I know one example. This will lead into my next point, where let's say you you're keeping the things that have emotional attachment. What I will always then suggest is, do you know if it's going to get re-released soon? Whether or not they're let's say you have the DVD and they're finally putting it on Blu-ray, or maybe it was a manga that was flipped ages ago and is finally getting unflipped, like Akira or Ghost in the Shell some odd years ago. Or it's just getting an updated version, like Maison Ikoku.
Mhm.
or it's going to get reprinted like Banana Fish, which I see. I could have sold my Banana Fish manga set for probably, I don't know, $400 or $500, and I could have just bought the reprints, but then I just got lazy, to be honest. But
Or maybe in my case, I'll use the Kimagure Road example again because we've discussed that. I've kept the Animigo box set because it's in my top 5 ever.
yeah, because
And it's like being a Star Wars fan, you'll buy in any format. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
like we're slightly different in that I would have, when there's a media format change and I know that there's going to be a re-release, or if I have a feeling there's going to be a re-release, I get rid of it. I usually don't want more than one copy of the same thing
I see.
unless there's a compelling reason why. So for me, I will keep my 5 centimeters per second DVD from ADV Films because that's the only way you can consume the ADV dub without pirating it. Because for whatever reason, the people at Comics Wave don't like the ADV dub, and they redubbed it when it eventually did come back out years later.
I think it was with
Or
Bandai. Was it with
yeah,
Bandai? If my
it
memory
was
serves me
with
right.
I think it was Bandai did put it out. I think it was a sub license at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. It's been for several years, and I don't want to look it up now. Now I believe it's is it disc? I don't think it's Discotech. I don't remember, but because it's out
Okay.
on Blu-ray now. Uh, but yeah, there was a new dub of it, which I believe it was a Bang Zoom dub, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a decent dub, but I do prefer the ADV dub for 5 centimeters. So that's why I will keep
The
the
Bang
ADV
Zoom
dub.
did come out in the first re-release, if memory serves me right. So that
Yeah,
was with Bandai, and that was a Bandai sub-license release. But I
yeah,
remember seeing the Bandai name associated with it.
I recall that too. My other example would be the Wings of Oniyamis, where I have that Bandai Visual USA Blu-ray, but I do have that shitty DVD that Manga Entertainment put out years ago because there is
Yeah.
an interview in that DVD release where I don't think was in the Oniyamis Bandai Visual Blu-ray release.
Mm-hmm. I think the same. I have both as well for reference.
I actually bought the Blu-ray first, and then I found the manga copy for like $5 at Nominoichi or whatever, something like that.
Okay. So, really, on your take, eBay or Reddit or maybe Facebook. We can't go. I would say I want to bring up Let Go just quickly, but that actually ceased operations here in Canada last week.
Yes, I think them and OfferUp merged.
And OfferUp doesn't have Canadian operations at this point.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why Let Go was Let Go.
I was not a
Let
fan of
Go was
Let
just
Go.
hit and miss for my case. I didn't have. I had mainly good experiences on it, but there was a couple dogs there too.
I think it's okay as a buyer, as a seller, unless you just have like stuff you just don't want. Like I wouldn't put anything of real value on Let Go because you're gonna get people trying to haggle you on Let Go.
Yeah.
I feel especially on Let Go, people will try and haggle with you or lowball you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that happens.
I didn't want to deal with Let Go because I
Would you
don't
say
have a lot of stuff that I just want. Like I'm just like F it, it's $5. Like I don't have a lot of that stuff.
Kijiji? Let me quickly go there.
Kijiji's fine.
Okay.
I think Kijiji is. I don't know how many people use it nowadays, but I still get hits on Kijiji every so often for stuff. I actually would not discount Craigslist either. Sometimes,
Ah.
like not as I don't. I feel like I feel like Craigslist is still being used a lot in the U.S. I don't think it's used so much in Canada. I feel like people prefer Kijiji in Canada. That's just the impression I get. But
Kijiji, if nothing else, is better marketed here. I mean, they had those commercials a few years back, right?
yeah,
And yes, I completely forgot about Craigslist. But Kijiji, I remember. Well, first of all, is it still tied to eBay? Refresh my memory,
Oh, I don't remember.
because I know like they it got broken up in some forms.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Kijiji a part like a subsidiary of eBay or something?
It definitely
Yeah,
was at one point.
Yeah.
it was at one point, but I wonder if it got taken out in the storm. That also ended up. Well, it is part of eBay still. I just looked it
Yep,
up.
just double checked myself. Yeah.
I was about to say PayPal because PayPal was part of eBay. It's not anymore. It's a separate thing.
Yes, that is
But
the case.
but my point was Kijiji was well marketed here. I mean, you kept seeing those commercials a few years back. I think you still see them. I think up until recently, maybe until like last year, you did see the odd Kijiji commercial. So it's the known commodity in Canada. It just made itself more aware. Craigslist doesn't have that marketing to me. As I said, what do I know sometimes? It's just, it was never visible. So in many respects, it's forgotten.
Hmm.
So Kijiji you'd be okay with, even though maybe it's not the most popular popular form these days. Reddit seems to be big. You seem to be big on, and I didn't really think about that or
I
realize
would. Reddit's good for an international audience, just like how eBay is.
that. Okay.
And the good thing with Reddit is that, uh, so what I neglected to mention when we were talking about eBay was that on top of the 10% that you're paying through eBay, unless you're with eBay Managed Payments, you'd otherwise be using PayPal to accept money from people, and PayPal will also ding you 2.9 to 3.9%. Last time I checked, it might be 4.4 now. I haven't really looked at the fee
Yeah,
structure in a while, but
PayPal sucks on that. When it comes to their fees, it's ridiculous.
it's
So
it's
it's still
still
high.
it's still low relatively speaking. But uh, it's so for let's say if you're selling to another person in Canada, it's 2.9% plus 30 cents.
Hmm.
So let's say if you're selling on Reddit, then you would then you don't need to deal with eBay. You just be only dealing with PayPal unless you actually find a local buyer.
Okay. So PayPal would probably be the preferred system on Reddit.
Yes.
That's
So you and
just to make that clear.
yes. So because what I do in most cases is that I will accept it as a goods and services transaction. So I set it up that way. So I will send somebody an invoice. Let's say the price ends up being agreed on one way or another. They send me their email address. Then
Mm-hmm.
I will create an invoice on PayPal, send it back to them, and then they would go ahead and pay. And as a goods and services transaction, it means that the buyer has recourse if the postal service loses your package, or if it comes in damaged.
Sort of an insurance.
It's insurance for the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like, obviously no one likes to pay fees, but sometimes it's nice to give the buyer that little bit of reassurance. And if you price your items accordingly, in theory, you would work the fee into the price anyway, if you had
Okay.
a price in mind.
Okay, that's a start. Oh, okay. Let's put this out there now. U.S. dollar, because we're up here in Toronto in Canada. The whole
Yes,
U.S. dollar thing, and there's always complications about if you get paid. If you're a Canadian seller, you get paid in American, but you can't get it in American. You
I
have to
do.
convert it, but there's issues there. But
I
yeah,
do. Well, I have a workaround. That's why.
Yes, I know you've mentioned the workaround, but that workaround may or may not work these days, right?
Yes, it kind of sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like I remember when I first tried my workaround, it did not work, and then months later I tried again and it did work. And it's the only reason why I bank at Royal Bank. I only have so to sum it up, you you would you would sign up for a specific Royal Bank US dollar savings account, which I don't remember the exact name. Then when you try to link your account, when you try to link your bank account with PayPal, you would then insert an American transfer number, which shouldn't work, but it did for me and for other people.
It's a little bit of a loophole, which may or may not have been tightened in time.
Yeah, Kevin, what are your thoughts on crypto exchanges for this type of stuff?
I have no experience on it. I don't see why not. If you know how to, if you deal with cryptocurrency and the other person does, I don't see why not. But I don't claim to have real experience with that. I don't deal with cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I have none either, by my own admission. I mean, you have any experience, Mo?
Just a couple of bits here and there, but I mean, it always seems like that would be the safest route in regards to selling stuff. I mean, that's always the biggest hiccup when it comes to any online transaction, right? The trust you put into the system that everything's just going to work, right?
The internet can be quite, what's the word? Well, it can trip you up, that's for sure. It can trip you up. I can safely say that.
Yeah, like let's see. So I had those fears too when I started. I first sold on eBay on 2012 because I actually got the 25 years of eBay blah 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 where they tell you like when you first sold something or buy something. And yes, my first sale was Black Lagoon, the Second Barrage Season 2
Heyo.
on
Nice
June
work.
on June 20th. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think I sold it because it was worth a lot at the time. But in any case, it was, you know, when you start off, it's really sometimes you still don't know what you're doing. Like I didn't have much of an idea of what I was doing. Like I tried to look things up in advance, but you kind of fail along the way, and then you get to a point where you're just comfortable with how to do the process, so to speak.
It sounds like most things in life, really.
Yeah.
It's one of those, you just do it. Hit the record button. That's what I had to say to myself 2 years ago when we started podcasting again. Or maybe back in 2006 when we podcasted, period.
For sure.
Started podcasting, period. As I said, the only thing I could think of right now is the way I feel like I want to try for the first time is one item that, whichever way it ends up going, I can live with its result. If it goes good, great. If it falters, I won't be too upset.
Yeah.
That's why I brought up the Pebble watch, because that was the item I felt that I had those feelings for.
Yeah, and you know what? Put it back up.
Try it again. First of all, I have to find it.
it.
I know what you said. I know what you said, Mo. Hang on to it.
I mean, that's only because it's a first edition Kickstarter nostalgia thing. It's like having a classic iPod or something, right? Like,
oh, by the way, I sold that. I had the last of the last iPod click wheel before they rebranded it iPod Classic. I sold that last year, but I sold it through Let Go.
Yeah,
But
vintage Apple products, you'd be surprised how much those go for. In fact, you'd be surprised how much Apple product boxes go for. There's a market for that.
The story of that, well, maybe I'll pass that story along maybe another time and privately, so that you can tell me how I ended up doing, and nobody else will know. Because looking back on it, I may not have done great with it, but I was happy to have gotten rid of it. It just wasn't there. I just had no use for it anymore. And none of the nostalgic stuff came into my head looking at it. So I was okay with it, whatever I ended up selling for ultimately, and it was a local sale. I just don't know what, like, the battery could have been failing for all I know. Too.
Yeah, like sometimes I always say do your research.
Mm-hmm. That's the key line.
Like
The thing
always do
was,
your research.
the line I was looking at the time, it was in the ballpark of what they might have been going for at the time. So, but I think that may or may not have changed. I should double check to see what those are now. And this is one of those things where I'll see it if it's higher now than what I sold it for back then. I'm not in the mood to kick myself over it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's done, right?
That because of that. But remember, those what was the like? It wasn't sparking joy. That's the thing, right? So that's the item. But right now, the focus would be something like that. And I told you yesterday, Kevin, I have the Xenosaga trilogy from PS2, but I never played through it. I have 3, but it's sealed up, sitting beside 1 and 2.
I'm surprised those did not get re-released at this point.
I know, but they're there. So, I mean, that could be some potential right there.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at
so.
I'm looking at my shelf. Sorry,
I'd say so.
Yeah, I have. Well, it wasn't a great anime, but I had the whole box set for Angel Tales here too. That was god awful. So, but I know people would be curious about that because there are people.
See, in the case of Xenosaga, I would sell yours as. See,
as a set.
I prefer to sell them as a set, but like I'm looking at eBay now, and Xenosaga sealed Xenosagas go for used Xenosagas go for like $200 US.
So imagine at least a 3. Well, at least one of them sealed, right?
Yeah.
The third one. I mean, we had this story. Like, remember this story from 3 years ago at the Nomi? I had the entire Tokyo Pop manga release of Welcome to the NHK.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Have that.
I still do too. But I mentioned the Nomi, and I held off on it. Ultimately, I didn't. But I was selling it completely as a set. But then people kept saying, well, are you just selling the last one? Are you just selling the last one?
Yeah, that happens with me too. When I sold my Ariyoshi manga set like years ago, and then I had this one guy that I think he wanted volume 16 specifically, because that was one of the harder volumes to get. And then I know he came twice at 2 different years, like asking me if I was willing to break it. I don't blame the man for trying, but
no.
Nope.
And to any listeners out there who may or may not be curious, if and when I do sell Welcome to the NHK, it'll be the whole thing as a set.
I would only. Sorry, finish. Sorry about that.
No, you would only, and I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead, say it.
I would only break a set if that last piece was at the end, and if it really was worth that much money. So I'm thinking like Aura Battler done by Volume 12 back in the day for the DVDs, because that thing commanded like $200, and then Volume 11 would command like $100-something. Because I remember seeing an auction where a guy did sell his Dunbine anime set in 3 different auctions. One auction containing volumes 1 through 10, one for volume 11 specifically, and one for volume 12 specifically, because the person did his research.
So
and he did them as auctions. That was the other thing.
That's interesting because I think it's the final volume of NHK that's hard to find for people. The very last volume.
Yeah, and that's and you
So,
in
so
most
you're
cases
telling
I don't
from that story. You're telling me it might be worth trying.
see. You could consider doing that for Xenosaga, I would say.
Oh, the that sealed copy of 3.
Yeah, you could consider breaking those up into 2 or 3 different auctions, or just 2 or 3 different listings as a buy it now. Whereas with manga, I don't like to do that because it, in my mind, it can make the rest of your collection harder to sell, especially if it's just a random volume in the middle.
Okay, so that theory may only work with disc media, not paper.
Depends on if that one thing is truly so valuable on its own that it's worth taking that chance on. Or so for example, I at one point had volumes 1 through 25 of the Hayate the Combat Butler manga. I sold those in chunks over the years because that was that still is an incomplete series in North America because it finally finished in Japan. So I would break off sets if it was the end chunk. So so in that example, someone bought volumes like 17 through 25. That I was okay with because that means I still have 1 through 16 to sell. If I like let someone buy volumes 4, 6, and 8, then that would have just been a pain to sell.
So basically, they had to be in order, like a proper group.
I feel like that's the ideal way to go about it.
Okay.
In most cases.
Well, how much do you want to continue talking about this? Because, we only have so much time this evening. And I think this is the type of thing, personally, I have to digest. And then we can talk about it again in a future digest-like episode. But these are the type of things I have to digest and think about a little more. I think
Yeah.
the key thing is start by taking inventory. That might be the first big step.
Yes. So I think in your case, Mike, I would start by just selling whatever is in your dwelling space right now. Because I can imagine that going all the way to the storage can feel a little daunting because I know that's where the bulk of your stuff is. So you can start with what's in your room. You can start with what's in the living room. That's how a lot of people start.
Mm-hmm. So we'll just start with, the stuff I actually pointed out.
And we didn't even talk about shipping, to be honest.
I guess something tells me that's another lesson.
I guess to sum it up quickly is...
or preview it more like it.
Like, Canada Post sucks. They're expensive. If you're selling more than one small book or one DVD, it's not cheap. And those costs add up quickly. So you always need to find alternatives on how you send stuff. So I always tell people, get a Canada Post business account, so to speak, because even you as an independent seller can sign up for this and it's free. And in most cases, you can get expedited shipping for almost the cost as regular post.
Okay.
Which will be faster and you have more insurance coverage. So if you're selling in the US, you live in the GTA or you live in like a more populated area, then you want to know what Stallion Express or Chit Chat Express are, because if you want discounts to sell things to the US, those are usually your better bets, or internationally. Sometimes you have to, look for boxes, and sometimes you have to be creative with the box. That's something that I only learned a few weeks ago, where you can alter the size of the box to save on shipping costs.
Okay.
Because sometimes cubic measurements are what drives the cost up, not the weight. It depends on what shipping service you're using, because different shipping services have different ways to determine the cost of things. There's different things you got to learn for shipping, for sure.
There's a lot of variables there, from what I could gather. Oh boy, lots to think about though. But I guess I'll take your suggestion. Just start with the items here that you know you want to get rid of, and then learn from there.
Yeah, and for me, I'll admit that I do find the whole process a little fun.
Ah, well, you've done it for quite a while too.
It becomes like a bit of a side hobby in a sense. Sometimes I feel like it's more productive than just, sitting on my ass watching TV or, sitting on my ass and playing video games, which,
Well, that's the story of my pandemic, dude. mind you, all that ends up being topics on this show too.
yeah.
So it's not without merit, I guess.
Like, it's a way to keep busy for me, and I feel a little more productive that way. And
Mhm.
and sometimes it's fun. I sometimes like looking for stuff to sell can also be fun at times.
You are a driven character. I'll tell you that much.
It's nice to be driven at times. I should be driven in other ways, but sometimes it's just nice to spend your
Yes.
time in a way that you wouldn't expect it to be.
Well, it's a fair statement.
I spent my
And
pandemic reading books. I finally was reading things in my manga collection, but I'll admit I did prioritize shorter series because I wanted to see if I wanted to keep them or not, and then if not, then I sold them. And I did sell
you rolled it all together. Well, whereas in my case, I was consuming items, but they ended up being long topics on this show.
some.
And but on top of that, they had me thinking about certain things. I mean, I make the joke about Yakuza constantly, but it has been a reflection of certain aspects of Japanese culture. And trust me, I think it has my mind spinning as I read a book like Pure Invention by Matt Alt.
hmm
Because we are going to be talking about that in a future episode, trust me. Or when I read Underground by Haruki Murakami, and that's about talking with victims of the sarin gas attack, and then in turn talking with members of Aum Shinrikyo, present and past, and former members who had nothing to do with the gas attack and their views on what happened. But
Mm,
then that ends up rolling into views on Japanese society in general and how they look at themselves and how these type of events end up shaping Japanese society, for one, and its pop culture, which was the subject of one of the anime North Moe panels that happened back in July,
yeah.
right? So
Mm,
I'm like, this is how I'm looking at all the reading I've done. And for reference, these are things I hadn't done in a long time because I've been so busy. And I've been so busy with work, which was brought up for the first time in the Space Heater chat episode with Angela last week. So so over this pandemic, I've been doing things that I hadn't done in years. I've like read a lot of books. I've played a full video game through, and I'm partway through another. I hadn't done that in a decade. Watched a few anime series, some that I've been dying to watch for a long time. Others that others have introduced to me. As I said, I'm forever grateful to Jesse Betteridge for introducing me to Wave Listen to Me.
mm.
Because that was a lot of fun. First time I came close to binge watching anything in a long time. So that's how I justify it all. So I'm doing this.
Oh, I remember my first memory of binging something for the first time in a long time.
Oh, my first binge was, by the way, Ranma,
Oh, wow.
because a friend lent me his VCR copies of the dubs, which was
Oh.
like, pirated, but And I just sat there all night watching as much as I can. Literally a dozen episodes that night, I believe. Anyway, it was about to. Oh, now I lost my train of thought.
I think that's about it, right?
Well, as I said, I'm just justifying or explaining. I'm doing this now. Now I remember the thought. I'm putting myself through this for the benefit of our single-digit number of listeners. Okay.
I guess I would want to say two last things about this whole topic.
On the subject, on this topic, and then let's start to close it out. Maybe preview the next regular episode.
Be proactive and be willing to adapt. So to be specific, so sometimes I've sold things because I would be on whatever subreddit and maybe I didn't get around to posting my thing yet, and I see somebody wanting what I have, and then I will proactively ask them, hey, I have this, I'm willing to sell it for X price. And when I mean being willing to adapt, sometimes you just have to lower your price. Sometimes you'll have to raise your price. Sometimes you'll have to adjust something in your listings because maybe you realized, oh crap, that thing costs more in shipping than I thought. And by the way, you should always know how much your shipping will cost so that you don't get burned later. That's something that I still have to do once in a while. I still make that mistake on occasion.
Thing from Angela about her Kickstarter?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a question on that, right, in the comments.
No, she had to adjust it because of the shipping for the US. It's like Kevin was mentioning, people don't put shipping into account when they're shipping to the US and whatnot. And it's like, prices.
Well, the whole adapting thing goes without saying. That's sort of society these days.
Yeah, like right? I finally sold Love Hina. That took like 3-4 years, and that took me. Yeah, I had the perfect edition with the 2 movies. So with Love Hina again, and the spring and winter specials, and I had
the very first one.
So. And I had Yu Asakawa sign it. It took years. I sold it this week finally because I was willing to lower. I was willing to let someone haggle me to a certain price.
Okay, so
sometimes you get to a point where you're like, am I really going to lose a sale over $10 or $5?
Yeah, that's true.
Things you have to think about too, because sometimes sometimes you may not always get what you want for an item, especially if it's something that you don't really know what the price is for. But sometimes it's better to just get rid of it, because having $20 or $40 is better than having $0.
Okay, that's a start.
Yeah,
and I always look for, I guess, different avenues. To that end, do not be shocked if we feature one item that is for sale here every so often. That might be an idea, What do you think? If there's an item that we think should be featured on this show that will be for sale.
Instagram's worth a look, actually, now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people use it. A lot of people sell clothing through Instagram.
That's true. Actually, I'm aware of that. Okay. You keep mentioning Reddit. Do you know what Reddit to look up?
In your case, for physical media, like your anime and your manga, I would go to Manga Swap. So r/Manga Swap.
Mm-hmm.
Most people mostly sell manga in there, but people do sell anime there as well. There's, I think for video games, I think it's r/Game Sale, if I'm not mistaken. Game Swap is if you're just willing to trade. I'm going to just quickly double check this.
All right. Well, and then as I said, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So I know for myself, there are things I did miss. I can re-listen to this, but I get the feeling we'll talk about it again too.
Yeah. It's r/Game Sale if you want to sell your video games.
Okay, excellent. And as I said, those are all starts.
And you usually want to sell in US.
Yeah, that's probably a key thing.
Because even if you don't have the loophole like I do, and TD may actually have a proper way of having that set up nowadays too. I haven't looked into it, but even when you lose out on both on conversion both ways, you'll usually get more in the end.
Oh, because of the fact it's in US?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's still around 30%
Yeah.
conversion. The
Something I gotta
conversion
learn.
rate's around 30% more after the fact,
Okay.
give or take.
All right. As I said, this is something I know we're going to come back to at some point in various forms. So, personally, I'm glad you dragged me out to do this one, Kevin. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, and as I said, we'll talk more privately about this as we start to uncover things again in the catacombs here.
Christmas is coming.
Yes, it is. So
That's one of the best times to get rid of stuff.
Probably I should. So in my case, and maybe for other our listeners out there,
Do it.
Start digging. Chances are you have time to. Okay, let's start previewing other things to come in future episodes of the Roundtable, or maybe look back a little bit. Did either of you listen to the Space Heater chat debut last week?
I did.
Yes, I did.
Actually started her Kickstarter.
You did donate as well, Mo?
Yep.
Okay.
I also recommend everyone listening, all single digit numbers of you out there, to also contribute. It's a great piece of work. Yeah.
Well, Angela's this, and I'm going to ask Angela about this next time we speak. Neil cued me in that she has actually been involved in making art for other Kickstarter projects. And actually, one of those he just got earlier this week, Neil told me. Neil and Jeff are set to do the Space Eater chats sometime in the near future as well.
Nice.
So that's something to look forward to. And then I think in the process, they may be rolled back into the roundtable rotations as well. But those are conversations I hope the listeners are looking forward to. I think I'd like to think people enjoyed hearing from Angela again, just to see what she's been up to. I know. Personally, I enjoyed talking to her. It had been a very long time since we chatted in any real form, so that was appreciated. So, Angela, if you're listening to this one, thank you. That was a treat to do. I guess let's look ahead to next week. Around this point next week, we'll be in the home stretch of TIFF. The Toronto International Film Festival did begin today, I think, or was it yesterday?
It was yesterday.
It was yesterday. And yes, it's a hybrid affair, as the saying goes. Mohammed is, as many of you know from last year, he's our regular. He's the resident TIFF guy. He's a regular there. He was able to sneak James and Kevin in to see Weathering with You and Makoto Shinkai's appearance at that screening.
Well, less sneaking and more assisting, really. Which I'm still very grateful for, Mohammed.
No problem. It's just so wild. This would have been my 8th tip this year, and now.
Okay. Well,
wow.
First of all, give a thought. Give a thought on what you see about it with TIFF this year. From my understanding, the lineup in the past has been the better part of 300 films, and now we're looking at
50
something, right?
Wow.
Okay.
It's so small.
Well, give me a thought. Give me your impressions of it, like right now, and then we can talk more about it next week.
I mean, I still haven't viewed any of the films yet. I'm planning on watching a couple in the next week. I'm looking forward to seeing how their digital system works. Not going to venture out to any of the screenings because there's only a handful of them, and I don't know. I just don't want to risk that.
and there's a risk. And you've been to movie theaters recently.
I know, it's so weird, right?
you went to see what was the movie? Tenet?
The only movie out, Tenet.
Yeah, the only movie out. That's good. and for reference, and on that topic, wanting to see movies, just to go back to the Space Eater chat, episode, James did pass along information concerning.
Was it that Abyss one? The Winds of Abyss?
Made in Abyss.
There you go. Yeah, Made in Abyss. Yeah.
He did pass on information, and that's been forwarded to Angela, and maybe we'll put that up here as well. Although I think she's more interested in watching it online as well. Okay, let's continue with this. I'm not going to ask for names right now because we're well over an hour.
There is a kind of cool one that I'm going to be watching. It's a Japanese one. Ex-Yakuza gets out of jail, has to readjust to life as a middle-aged ex-Yakuza dude. Pretty cool.
What's it called?
Shoot. You know what's funny? I know the name. I just can't off the top of my head. Give me a second.
If it's Way of the House Husband, this recording's over.
Oh, man. Come on. Oh, Under the Open Sky. There you go. I knew that. Okay.
Oh.
It's a drama, though, right?
I'm
guessing
it's a drama. I mean, from the description, it seems hilarious. He spent 13 years in jail for murder, gets out and has to adjust to the new normal. I'll put the link.
Yeah, it sounds just on that alone. It sounds like the video game I'm playing. Not even close, but that scenario. Like, what's your take on the virtual? And
I mean, we can talk about it a little more next time because I haven't experienced it yet. I want to give, I guess, a shout out to them because people keep forgetting this. TIFF isn't like a company. TIFF's it's a nonprofit. Like, they're not making money off of doing TIFF, right? Mm-hmm. So their main source of revenue, which is the annual festival and their movie system, has all been uprooted because of COVID. So they're like, and they had to let go a ton of staff and people. It's one of those things where like what they had to overcome this year just to put on a festival should be applauded. I mean, the fact that there is a festival at all this year should be applauded. Should it happen? I don't know. Maybe not, but we'll see.
It's also a big part of the business. Festivals are also where distribution deals are made.
That's one thing I will give them major props for. The fact that they split the festival up into like two like sections. They have like the pro version, which is for like people who come to the festival to buy films, and then like the normal consumer digital side where Joe Schmo can just log on, pay the prices actually aren't that bad. It's like $20, $30 to see a movie. They have a whole 24-hour.
That's just what it normally costs, though.
Yeah, which I don't understand. Like, yeah, a normal ticket for a TIFF movie is about $20-$30, and a digital ticket is $20-$30. I mean,
and people are up in arms.
Not really, because I think because of the way they're doing it. Like, for instance, Mulan came out last week, and that
I know, because people are up in arms sometimes about Mulan for various reasons.
I mean,
yeah, okay.
Let's talk strictly on the price thing.
We're talking. So in Canada, it's $35, and you have to be subscribed to Disney Plus.
Right. I will say for the whole Mulan thing, if anyone paid for that, like legit went out and gave Disney like money for that, come on, guys, come on.
I think the holdout is that it will start to make its way to other forms, like at the end of the month or something.
Yeah, they said December or something, but even then,
it's not. It's a typical window, really.
And you know what? I get why. Like, they need to recoup the cost of that movie now that not nearly as many people are going to watch it in theaters. I understand.
If I was a major movie or major company like Disney or Warner Brothers or something, I would just put everything on hold. I mean, they're pushing Wonder Woman back to December. Just put everything on indefinite hold. No movies in 2020. We'll all push everything back to say middle 2021, maybe 2022. I mean, just wait. Like, there's no shame in just shelving it and having a wait. I think the only yeah, I mean, it's so funny. There was this tweet that went around saying how the new Dune trailer came out and how awesome it looked and how great it's going to be and how it's going to make an awesome $15 million. I mean, a movie that cost $200 million to make that would have normally easily grossed $100 million opening weekend. It's like, it's a little bit ridiculous, but it's funny.
That's a good joke, actually. That's a pretty good joke.
I'm not taking credit. Twitter, that's a Twitter joke. I will give that credit to Twitter and Twitter alone.
And if you can find the tweet itself, we'll put it up. Which you can't right now, right?
I have friends that are going to bootleg Mulan. As soon as they're able to bootleg it, they will. If not already.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I guess personally, Mulan. I guess I have my watching to do. It's not in Mulan right now. And for reference, I mentioned to Mohammed before the last episodes we taped, Ready Player One was about to come off of Netflix, and I want to watch that before it expired, which was in the second day in September, so about 9 days ago, which is a tour de force, by the way. It was enjoyable. And funny enough, a few days before that, Amazon has weekly Kindle sales. Ready Player One was available for 1 day that Sunday for $3. I'm pretty satisfied. Although I have to say this about its star. Its star is Ty Sheridan
of X-Men fame.
Yes, he played Cyclops. This guy seems to just have a habit of having half his face covered.
That is good. That's good. That's good.
It's just that's the first thing that comes out to mind when I think Ty Sheridan right now. And I know that's just
Kevin. Have you seen Ready Player One yet?
I haven't. I remember that coming out when I was working at EB Games, and my coworkers did not take too kindly to that film, and I know at least a couple of them had seen it. But so I had no real interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was cool seeing all the references in the commercials because they played that commercial in my store constantly. But you know, I feel like I would, you know, if you had dragged me to go see it, I'd still watch it, and I would probably still find it entertaining. But I just had no real inclination otherwise.
I will say I enjoyed it. Not exactly the most plot-heavy, character-developing type movie, but visuals were great. The references to the 80s were great. Since that's when I was growing up. And just for reference, it kept going right up until the end with those references.
The end battle. So,
yeah, that was
the
good.
references not get overwhelming after a while.
It advertised itself as being as
bang,
bang,
Kevin,
bang,
think of it like this: someone's lightly punching in your arm for like an hour. After a while, you kind of forget, but then every so often, he takes a right hook to your face, so you feel that.
Wait, so in terms of references, how would you compare it to, say, Wreck-It Ralph?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, on par, I guess. I mean, maybe more so. Actually, definitely more so. Actually, Wreck-It Ralph was kind of subtle with its references, I guess. Ready Player One is not.
And I realized, and for reference, there's also now I realized, you know, since Netflix will come up with recommendations right after, there's a documentary on Netflix, High Score, on the whole video game industry, which will be a watch for me in the near future. I have to also say this, as a Torontonian or a GTAer, the closing theme song, the closing credits song,
Rush
for Ready Player One was Hall & Oates. Well, Rush. Hall & Oates, You Make Me Dream started off the closing credits, right? Which, for the last couple years, has also been the goal celebration song for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which meant you didn't hear it much this summer.
You know, speaking about the Leafs, I like how you added that little bit at the very end of one of the last few episodes when you mentioned the Leafs. Like, oh, because you added that like after the fact, in post recording, I would imagine, or post production.
Oh yeah. The
Oh,
whole.
like you had a little leaf bit. I was like, oh, that hurt.
Yeah, well, I say that a lot. Well, I'll say this much as we finish up this evening. I'll check out the Raptors game as well and see how the collective heartbeats
Actually,
and
Mike, I
anxieties of
believe
the
you
city
and
are
Kevin
going.
are in the rare position where all you need to do is open up a window in like 3 hours and you'll know the answer.
Well, I'm not in St. James, just for reference. Well, if you have any questions or comments, especially after Kevin's little lesson tonight, animeroundtable@gmail.com is our email address. You can contact us on Instagram and Twitter at Anime Roundtable. AnimeRoundtable.com is our show archive mainly. It is our website. We do put show notes there as well. Chances are the Reddit links will be mentioned. Or now that I've mentioned it, I am obliged. We do have a Discord. We haven't used it yet, but I get the feeling maybe we're looking for excuses just to keep expanding this podcast's footprint in whatever form. It's getting to that point. Kevin Mo, thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
Kevin, I'll report to you as to how this type of stuff goes.
Sure thing.
Mo, I'll expect your full report next week concerning TIFF. At least
Roger
from
that.
what you did see. And we may have to resuscitate James, depending on what happens tonight.
Oh, you know what I just found out?
Oh, the last thing before we go.
The Toronto Japanese Film Festival is going to happen in this fall, actually. But
Oh, yes, that's right. What's the dates?
let's see. It's this October from the looks of it.
Okay. See, I saw the list. I wish Wodokoi was there, for starters. Like it was
Yeah.
at Fantasia. I certainly would go out of my way to see that. And
And
I haven't
it's all online, too. It looks like
Huh?
it's going entirely online.
Yeah, that's well, they kind of experimented with it to some degree over the past few months with some of the anime features that the JCCC linked into.
I see.
So that's something to look forward to. Anyway, that's pretty much all we got for this digest. Thanks a lot for listening, and join us again next time.